Greetings. This is General CJG here, coming to you with a very special Expanded Universe podcast. One of the more important ones that we'll definitely be doing because it's on a big Expanded Universe source or media, or more like Multimedia Project. Now, we're only going to be covering 2 parts of it, but there are 2 big parts nonetheless. So, joining me here are...
Captain Henson, excited to be here as always.
Okay, and...
Django Fett had to come and join for this particular review.
Yes, indeed, Shouts the Empire. This is the one. Shouts the Empire, the book, and the comic. This is what we're going to be doing this podcast right now. So, without further ado, let's get into our first experiences with Shadows of the Empire, book and the comic to be specific. The game will have its own podcast in a later future, but right now, book and the comic. So, who wants to go first with the first experience with the book and the comic?
I'll go. So, my first exposure was through the video game, and from there I learned about the greater Multimedia Project. I got the novel like a year and a half ago, and I read it, and I really enjoyed it. I think it's better than Heir to the Empire, but that's neither here nor there. And a few months ago, I finally read the comic. I had already known that it was essentially just an abridged version of the novel, with scenes exclusive to Boba Fett. And, I mean, it was good. Getting to see what Boba Fett was up to was nice, but And, of course, I had to reread it here, and yeah, I can definitely say I like it a hell of a lot more than Heir to the Empire.
Anything else?
That's it on my end.
Okay. The Django?
Alright, so this was back in my, what was it? Middle school, high school days, which was a long time ago in a galaxy far away. But, yeah, I remember just grabbing this from the library, and I think this was probably one of the first, maybe a couple books later, that was kind of one of the books that I read by itself, where I just was my bridge point for the expanded universe, for the novels, and from there I read a bunch of other novels. From that point on, became obsessed with the expanded universe, but I probably have to say that was probably my bridge point from there, and easily one of my favorites of the bunch. I mean, this is just one of the most memorable expanded universe stories of all time for me. This is the one experience out of all the novels that I just remember loving and liking the most, and even listening to the audiobook for me it's still a welcome treat for me. It's still a great experience. And then for the comic, this was I think it was years later, and then just seeing an omnibus for it and kind of reading both The Shadows of the Empire and Evolution, which is after Shadows of the Empire. And I don't think I really like them compared to the novel per se, but I still appreciate them for what they did with those stories. So, yeah, those are my experiences.
Okay, well, this one leads into me. So, mine is... I think I'm going to sound like a broken record because I've said this several times. Mine is an interesting one. So, basically, my first experience with Shadows of the Empire, the book and the comic. So, the book actually came out very shortly after the release of a specific Star Wars movie that came out in late 2017. You guys know which one. It's definitely number 1 on my most despised Star Wars movies ever. So, you guys know which one. I don't need to say more, other than definitely was what drove me to want to read more Expanded Universe. And that drive, because I had this intense interest in wanting to get into the Expanded Universe, I basically went in and researched into how to get into it, because I've been reading about the expanding, well, not reading, but hearing about how the expanding universe, it's a lot more than just the video games, the TV shows, and And seeing several YouTubers and other people saying, oh, you can start with the Tron trilogy and everything. And then my good old buddy, the Django, made a review on Shadows of the Empire. He pretty much strongly recommended that, yeah, you just need Shadows of the Empire to get into it. You don't need to read a whole trilogy and everything. And I said, okay, fine. I'll give it a shot. And I gave it a shot. I was waiting anxiously for the book to arrive because I ordered that and the Tron trilogy on Amazon. The Tron trilogy books 2 and 3 arrived first, not the first one, and Shadows of the Empire, and I was like, damn it. And then I waited, and once they finally came in, I immediately started reading Shadows of the Empire. I finished that book in time record in 3 days, like just reading it in 3 days. And it's not really the shortest Star Wars book I've read, actually, but it's 385 pages. But I finished it in 3 days because I was so freaking engaged with that book that I was like, holy shit, this is really, really good. And so that's how I went to the book. Like, it was really amazing to read it. It was so awesome. Nowadays, it definitely is still really awesome to read. Definitely still highly recommendable. So that's the book. The comic, well, first time I actually read it was a few days ago for the podcast. And decent read. But yeah, because 2/3 of it is the an abridged version of the book. Definitely not super impressive. Only unique parts are obviously Boba Fett and with this new character called Jixton, which is an Imperial spy working for Vader. And that's about it with the comic. There's not much with my experience, but the book, oh, I definitely have a history with that one. So yeah, Shadows of the Empire was the first ever EU book I ever read. From there, well, I went to the Tron trilogy, so on and so forth. So yeah, that's how I first read the book and the comic. My experience with the entire Multimedia Project came through the N64 video game, but for the book itself, this is how it went. And so yeah, yep,
That's actually very interesting because it's like I didn't even actually realize for the longest time that you didn't even. Well, I knew for the longest time, but like I just forgot about it. But I didn't even know that I even inspired you to even actually read the book for yourself. So that I thought that was pretty interesting.
Well, most people said, oh, go with the Tron trilogy or go any part of the Hispanic universe. But your review was one of those that said, actually, just Shadows of the Empire, just one book, no need to get into the trilogy. And if you've seen at least the original trilogy of movies, then you're pretty good. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll get into that. So, yeah, that's my first experience with the book and the comic. So, that's all I can say. But enough about our first experiences, because let's get into the actual meat itself. The real deal. The freaking Shadows of the Empire book and comic. First, we're gonna go through the book. So, this is gonna be a bit more different compared to how we do it in the comics. The comics go through every issue. Here with the book, we're gonna go through the major parts of the synopsis of Shadows of the Empire as a whole. Obviously, we're not gonna be mentioning parts that are specific to other sources, like the ones in the video game. Like no. So we're gonna go through the synopsis book. So we start with the prologue. So. The Django, Henson, you guys want to quickly mention what the prologue is, or you want me guys to do it?
Yeah, you can start off.
Okay, well, prologue is a very simple one. It cuts back into a familiar scene that we've seen in episode 5, which is Darth Vader talking with the Emperor in the hologram. Except that in here, we actually see it from a different perspective, from the other side, aka through the Emperor's room. Why? Because little did any of us realize, I was like shocked when I actually first read this, that Prince Shisor was in the same room that Palpatine was making that transmission to Vader. In that same room, and he pretty much overheard the entire freaking holo transmission. That blew my mind. That Prince Shisor all along, and that's in episode 5, he was there, just on the same room. Like, yeah, that same holo transmission, the one that the young Skywalker must not become a Jedi, and Vader suggests to turn him. Like, that same one, that's the prologue, but from a different eye point, different perspective or viewpoint. So, yeah. That blew my mind. I don't know what you two guys think about that one.
Oh, yeah. Certainly one of the best parts of the EU, in my opinion, is taking scenes from the films and putting them in a new context. Now, side note on this is the pre-special edition change, so this is the original dialogue exchange.
Mm.
Not a problem, it's just an interesting note there.
Yeah, it still is the same scene, and it still has Prince Shiso in the same room as Palpatine, so it's still canon regardless.
Yeah. Then, yeah, just interesting note.
Yeah. Django, what do you think of that prologue?
It's definitely pretty interesting. I don't know what more to say. It's definitely a good start to the book for sure.
Yep. So that is indeed the prologue. Now, after that, now we cut into part one of this entire story. So it's basically the search for Boba Fett. So, basic summary, to put it simply, well, Boba Fett, well, of course, as we know, he hunts Han Solo because this story happens shortly after Episode 5, Han Solo and Carbonite. He pretty much goes to a specific Gal spaceport because he had some sort of a run-in with 5G88. He pretty much had to go to the Gal spaceport on the Shar system to have his ship fixed. Then Luke, Leia, Lando, even Dash Rendar, they go to find him. So yeah, Luke, Lando, Leia, and even Dash, they're pretty much searching for him. And little do they know that Prince Shizor has a few plans up his sleeve in regards to how to not only deal with Darth Vader, but also pretty much be on the good side of Emperor Palpatine. But to do so, he has to, how to say it, kill Luke Skywalker. Yeah. So, so yeah, that's the most basic I can put it without going into major spoilers. So yeah, that's the most basic. So guys, what do you guys think of this? Part 1, Search for Boba Fett.
I would say this was a really good introduction. We see what our movie characters are up to, get resituated with them, get more development on Luke training to become a Jedi Knight, which is something we see further developed throughout the book. And Prince Shizor is, at least with this introduction, is a really good villain. And because he plays into the side of Star Wars I really like, which is the seedy underbelly of the galaxy, we get to see how Black Sun operates, how he acts as a leader. And his main bodyguard, Guri, is, well, she is quite the weapon.
Yep, indeed. Something about Guri, she's basically a human replica droid. One that looks very much like a pretty attractive blonde, but she's not really human. She's kind of a synthetic with some organic parts. So there's that. She can pretty much pass off as a human, unless you put some sort of bioscanner in her. So.
Yeah, she can eat, drink. She can pretty much do anything a human can do to help with the facade, but we'll see later on in the novel that there are ways of detecting what she really is.
Yeah, indeed. So there's that. One of my favorite parts of this, and we'll definitely get a bit more in detail in the next two parts, is Luke definitely training by himself in Ben Kenobi's home. Actually, not only training, creating his lightsaber. Yep. So this is where we see how he's creating his green lightsaber, that's awesome. Like, I definitely do like seeing more Luke with his green lightsaber because that's actually his lightsaber instead of using the blue one from Anakin. Nothing against that. I actually like seeing with that too, but green lightsaber definitely is the one to go. So I thought it was awesome, and the fact that Obi-Wan was, let's just say, wise enough, or pretty much leave some sort of a plan of sorts, basically say that, okay, I'm going to leave to Luke this book so he knows how to create his green lightsaber. Like, pretty interesting, very forward thinking. Good job, Obi-Wan. So, there's that. So, another character gets introduced, of course, Dash Rendar. So, what do you guys think of Dash Rendar?
All right, so he's pretty much kind of like yes, he's a smuggler, but he's not like your everyday smuggler. He's kind of like a mix of like a more badass version, even more badass version of Han Solo, and a more muscular version. And he has his own sidekick. I forget. It's like
Lebo.
I forget his name.
It's the droid Lebo.
Yeah, yeah, and he rides this awesome ship called the Outrider, and if I could collect that as like a collectible, that would be awesome. To him next to like his ship, that would. I mean, I think the Outrider is like one of my favorite ship designs in the Star Wars universe. It's up there with like the Millennium Falcon for sure. I honestly think it's better than the Millennium Falcon in many ways, just in my personal opinion. But yeah, I mean, he's just a great character overall, and you'll see later on down the road how charismatic, how brash at times. But he's a very helpful character throughout this entire series, and you'll see throughout this book and in the video game. I mean, he's like a whole nother level. But yeah, he's just fantastic.
The Outrider actually does have a toy. If you want to go after it, Django on Amazon.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So there is actually an official way to get a toy, which is awesome. So Henson, what do you think of Dash Rendar?
Well, I think Dash Rendar is really cool character. Best way to describe him would be if Han Solo didn't have a character arc. Yeah, I mean, he bounces off the movie characters really well.
Yeah.
Yep. And
Wish he made more appearances outside of the Multimedia Project and Evolution. But,
Oh,
well, I mean, chronologically speaking, I would have liked if he appeared more after Evolution. But, and his droid, Lebo, doesn't get a lot of spotlight in this book, so that's definitely a reason to also play the game. We do get some of his, we do get to see kind of what their relationship is like, but it's further developed in the video game.
yes, indeed. I definitely like Dash Rendar here. He definitely, as the Django and the Ensign said, yeah, he's pretty much a Han Solo in terms of if Han Solo remained how he was in Episode 4 and never really developed in Episodes 5 and 6. That's basically what it is, and a bit more overconfident. So definitely that's Rendar in a nutshell, and it fits here given that Han Solo's being carbonite, so there's no Han Solo that we're gonna get. So I guess somebody similar to him would help in this case. So, but yeah, I do wish Dash Rendar would appear in more than just Shadows of the Empire, Shadows of the Empire Evolution, and also more than just Shadow games. So yeah, he does appear in Star Wars X-Wing Alliance, and well, we'll get into its appearances later on. So, but yes, so yeah, Dash Rendar, yeah, awesome character, indeed. So we'll get into a bit more into other characters as we go. So any other things to mention on part 1, Search for Boba Fett? This is before we go to the Gal spaceport. So any final thoughts, guys?
yeah. So yes, the story is set between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. But it's not a random story. It actually has relevance for Return of the Jedi, as we mentioned before. The point of Luke's lightsaber, of how it changes, how he created that lightsaber, and many of the characters, with Leia having her certain costume in the Return of the Jedi. So there is a lot of relevance and continuation from Shadows of the Empire that helps set up Return of the Jedi in many ways. So it's not just a random story. It has a lot of relevance in the grand scheme of things.
Yep, indeed. So that's definitely awesome. So yeah. So anything else to mention?
No.
Okay, then now we go to part 2, which is the Battle of Gal in the Gal spaceport, the Shar system. So Okay, so this is basically Luke, Leia, Lando, Chewie, as well as Rogue Squadron. They pretty much set up in the Kyle Moon to then go to the Gal spaceport to go and get Boba Fett, who has Han Solo and Carbonite. So battle goes. Definitely does not go as well as it was planned because not only Boba Fett escapes, but also for some reason next wing was shooting at Luke's X-wing. Basically because a malfunctioning R2 droid in that X-wing wanted Luke dead. So, but yeah, like plenty happens in this battle. So guys, shall we get on to it? What do you guys think of this part?
Yeah, getting a pretty exciting space battle. Getting to see the rogues in action again is always nice, and of course, Wedge being there. A very, very minor character in the movies, but it's always a delight to see him pop up. But we do see here. So this is one of our first indications with our main characters that somebody wants Luke dead. And this, begins to really set things up and really pushes our main cast in some kind of confrontation with Black Sun. And, of course, focusing more on the galaxy as a whole and less so on the Force is something I greatly appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
And getting to see the relationship between Shizor, Palpatine, and Vader really flesh out here. It does a really good job at showing that Palpatine is a jackass. I mean, we got that in the movies, but here it's really made clear how much he just loves pitting different people or different sides against each other. Certainly a wink wink, nudge nudge to what we see later, but also earlier in the timeline.
The prequels. Yep. So, indeed. The Django, what do you think?
Yeah, it's fine. The battle is pretty cool. Pretty short battle. It sets up for another important battle, which is way better.
Yeah.
But it's fine. It's it's okay.
Mm-hmm. Nice, indeed. One thing I gotta mention about this specific part of the story is that so the person that tried to have Luke killed was a technician that was pretty much bribed to basically make the droid not malfunction, but more like program Wes Jensen's R2 to pretty much try to shoot Luke, and Luke has to use the Force in full force to pretty much blast the droid. Or immobilize the X-wing. Well, actually, he did both actually. Well, no, he didn't destroy the R2. He immobilized the X-wing by shooting the engines and the blasters. So that was actually the first time I fully when, because this one, keep in mind, this was my first time I read the Expanded Universe, Shadows of the Empire, the book. That was the first time I legitimately saw the full extent of how the Force works when a Jedi or any Force user is piloting a starfighter. Like that was, and it was freaking awesome. Like it was, it also explained why Luke Skywalker, even if he's not as good as Anakin Skywalker, he still was very competent in piloting spacecraft. So it was freaking awesome. So yeah. And so, another thing that you already mentioned, Henson, that the Shizor's relationship with the Emperor and Vader. Yep, like with the Emperor, he's definitely getting favored, but Vader is like really hating Shizor. Shizor also hates him. So, yeah, there is indeed that. So, but yeah, anything else to mention in part 2?
No.
Okay, then now we go to part 3, and this is where now we're getting into the deep end of Who Wants Luke Dead. Part 3, Hunting the Assassins. So while Lando and Leia, they pretty much go to Rhodia to meet Barrow, which is Greedo's uncle. Yeah, Greedo's uncle. surprisingly, he has no grudge against Leia and Lando because of what happened to Greedo. So I guess so. There's that. But yeah, he pretty much promises them to bring a contact to Platt's son. They have to wait there, and while they're waiting, well, Luke is back in Ben Kenobi's home, pretty much finishing his lightsaber, and he actually finishes it. Yep. His green lightsaber, we all know and love, finished, fully realized. He's testing it. He's testing it with R2. He doesn't really get much of a competition, but then some swoop gang members arrive in their swoop bikes, and they pretty much start shooting at Luke, wanting him dead. And Luke, well, he defends himself, even escapes by taking one of the swoop bikes into Big Ass Canyon, and well, he pretty much survives with the help of Dash Rendar. So, yep, those two definitely survived that. And so there is that. And then, of course, as we know, Shizor is still going with his plan to not only kill Luke, but also get more favor with Palpatine. This is where we actually... You guys remember the line from episode 6 of Many Buttons Died to bring us information regarding Death Star 2 plans?
Yep.
Well... This is it. We actually get to see that here in this specific part. Yeah, so here actually in this part, pretty much the Buttons they managed to get intel from specific source, Black Sun, regarding a project of sorts that they basically a project of sorts, and Ozzy Voice is aboard some sort of freighter called the Suprosa, and so Luke and Dash go to Botaway to pretty much meet with the Buttons and try to get that information in their hands. So yeah, little did they know that was pretty much planned by not only the Emperor but Shizor. Actually, it was Shizor's idea to deliberately give the rebels the Death Star 2 plans, making it even more a reality what Palpatine said, that he allowed the rebellion to know the location of the Death Star as well as the plans. Like, it was planned. the guy planned all that shit for episode 6 to happen. So, yeah. So what do you guys think of that? All this entire part, I should say. But what do you guys think of that?
Well, this part really emphasizes why this is such a good companion piece to the movies, further developing a single line of dialogue and actually getting to see it. And it's always nice to get things in greater context. Django, you go.
Okay, so it kind of gives us an idea of who is actually planning all of this. But there's a reason why there's a certain character that is wants Vader to look bad in a certain way. And I won't spoil that, but it's just... It definitely sets up for his character. And for me, when it comes to villains... I would say Zizor is probably one of the best. He's not the best, of course, but he is like not your prototypical what you would think a villain would be when it comes to something from like a random like He-Man episode or Skeletor or something like that, one-dimensional. But like this is like he is like a conniving, very smart, deceptive when he needs to be, and he can fight too, and it proved in the previous chapter or two that we discussed that he can play with his prey and defeat people no problem. So he's a very capable villain, no problem.
Mm-hmm. Yep, indeed. So something I gotta mention about Hunting the Assassins. Once again, love seeing Luke Skywalker finally finishing his lightsaber and putting it in action almost immediately. Like it was awesome. I really liked that. So, and I also liked that, well, Dash pretty much overheard the conversation and pretty much arrived there to help Luke, and also like seeing how Vader pretty much doesn't like the idea of giving the Death Star plans to the rebels, but Palpatine is like, I know best. You just stay quiet, do your job. So, and definitely ended up being could have been a successful plan had a few things that happened in Return of the Jedi didn't happen, but that's another story. So, but yeah, so there is that. And also Leia, Chewie, and Lando pretty much spending all the time in the casino just waiting for Curry. Like, that took its time. So, indeed. So yeah, any other things to mention in this one? Or should we go down to the next part?
We can move on.
Okay, now we get to capturing the supercomputer, which is part 4. The one that the supercomputer being aboard the Imperial freighter, the Superosa. So, now we get here. Basically, the Luke Skywalker, Dash Render the Outrider, and the Botans pretty much try to get the supercomputer. Freighter this doesn't do it. Let's just say it doesn't surrender that easily. It does put up a fight, and doesn't win. They still manage to get the supercomputer, but like the rebels manage to get the supercomputer, though at a small cost. I'm getting a bit. Then after that, well, Luke and the rest of the gang, they pretty much return to. Well, they actually go to Godless to get the supercomputer analyzed and everything. And just when they realize they're attacked by some bounty hunters searching for Luke, they capture Luke. Luke then suddenly manages to free himself from their grasp and escapes. So that definitely happens. Meanwhile, Leia, Lando, Chewie, and the others on Rhodia, they meet Guri. And they have several conversations. They deduce that Guri is a human replica droid. And Guri pretty much, from there, decides to bring Leia and Chewie to Prince Shizor. She gives them some costumes to get into Shizor's palace. They manage to get in there. And from there, well, some interesting things happen between Leia and Shizor. But I'll let Henson get into those details once finish here. So there's that. And meanwhile, Vader, he pretty much was sent to Godless not only to capture Luke, but also pretend that he's there to reclaim the supercomputer. Though in there, Vader finds that Black Sun may be more involved with the capture of Luke Skywalker than he anticipated. So there is indeed that. And so yeah, that's the most basic summary I can give here for this part. So guys, what do you think of this part 4, capturing the supercomputer?
So this part is really where things, start ramping up and really start leading towards the climax. Getting to see the particular line in episode 6 from Mon Mothma developed and actually seen is really great. Definitely a strength of the EU. Shizor being infatuated with Leia is, well, he wouldn't be a sleazeball criminal overlord if he didn't have the hots for a girl. But, well, he gets his comeuppance later on. And also getting to see Luke put in a situation where he has to be patient is definitely one of my favorite scenes in the novel. Again, the idea that he's becoming the confident Jedi Knight we see in episode 6. That's what I have to say on that.
Weren't you gonna also mention something regarding the battle on the Superosa?
Yeah, we get a really good character moment for Dash where he and us as the audience think he failed at something. Won't get into detail on that. But he's shaken up about it, and we see that there is more to him than just being an arrogant jackass, like we've seen previously. He does have depth to his character. He does feel things. And, of course, also the idea of it, like, being a hit to the ego could also be playing a part, but, yeah, there's that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, I just picking up off that, it's just like, he was very an overconfident person throughout this whole story, but I think at that point, it broke his confidence altogether, and he's basically saying after this point, he's like, I thought I had him. I had this guy, because he fired this missile and it ended up backfiring. And in the process, people died. And Luke is like, what the hell, man? What are you doing? Why did you make this mistake? And it really damages him for the longest time. I think up to when he sees Leia, but even then, he's just kind of like, he's kind of bothered by the whole thing, even when he sees Leia about that moment. So he's still devastated over that whole moment. And I was actually surprised that Luke was somehow captured in that moment because there's a certain character who doesn't want him to be captured, but I think these goons didn't know any better and they did the wrong thing anyway.
Indeed.
And also regarding Zizor and Leia, he uses his pheromones to basically he can do it to any female species and attract them to like him. And I've always I don't know if this was the same with the female species of
It is actually.
the race. Oh, okay. So female can attract the males. Okay, so that's interesting. Okay. So yeah, I thought so too. I just didn't know beforehand. But yeah. I thought that was pretty cool too.
Yep, it's a unique skill or trait from the Fallen. They have those pheromones that can attract whomever they want.
Yeah.
So there's that. By the way, there's another thing that I mentioned. This specific part has a specific outfit that Leia wears in Return of the Jedi. You know, the Bush bounty hunter outfit, the same one we see in Return of the Jedi.
Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention this before, but I actually had an action figure of Chewie, and I didn't even know where this was from, but it was from the Shadows of the Empire story where he has like the shaved head and or like a mohawk style, and then he has like an eye patch and stuff. And I had this figure for the longest time, but then I found out, oh yeah, this is from Shadows of the Empire. So I thought that was pretty cool. So yeah, that was a cool new look for Chewie, and never see him with any new look whatsoever.
Yeah, indeed. So yes, yet another thing that Shadows of the Empire did to set up Return of the Jedi. You know, like did with the green lightsaber. Now did with Bounty Hunter Bush's outfit for Leia, so on and so forth. It's definitely awesome. Any other things to mention on this specific part, guys?
No.
No? Okay, well, now we get to the final part of the synopsis, the Lair of the Dark Prince, aka the ending where pretty much Luke, Lando, Chewie storm Caesar's palace, manage to get Leia out of there, and they pretty much escape, while Shizor also escapes his personal craft, and he escapes to his skyhook. The Millennium Falcon tries to escape, but they're being chased by Shizor's fighters, and so they're forced to fight. Rogue Squadron manages to join in on the fray, and also the Empire joins in on the fray. Darth Vader, to be precise, with his Super Star Destroyer, Executor. Except that the Executor is actually not going for the Rebels, going for Shizor. And, well, Vader's pretty much pissed because he pretty much got a transmission, like intercepted a transmission that Shizor sent to his own fighters that he's going after Luke Skywalker and wants to destroy him. And Vader's pissed, has his evidence, and it pretty much proceeds to annihilate Shizor. And because Palpatine is not in Coruscant at this point, yeah, he had to leave to oversee the Death Star 2's construction. So Vader was the one in charge of the Empire at that point, so he pretty much was pulling the shots, and he pretty much ordered the Executor to destroy Shizor's skyhook, and that pretty much destroyed Shizor, because Shizor is dead as of here. And of course, this leads to the end in which Luke is recording the transmission for to send to Java's palace. You know, the same one in which he introduced himself and gives it to droids as gifts. And like that's in transmission. Like there's that. We also get a quote unquote death to a particular character. We'll get into it soon. But yeah, so this is the big battle. So what do you guys think of this one?
Oh, well, this was a really good finale, really bringing all the different plots together.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Shizor finally getting his just deserves was satisfying.
Yeah.
Of course, Shizor himself, as we learned earlier, does have a sympathetic backstory that involves Vader. So on the one hand, Shizor was, a criminal overlord, but on the other hand, we do have some bit of sympathy towards him. Though not like it matters, by the end of it, he's dead. And we also get a perfect segue into Return of the Jedi. And also something to note is another reason to play the game is that there's an extra scene when you play on the harder difficulties that you don't see in the novel relating to a character, so just keep that in mind.
Yeah. So there's that indeed. Django, what do you think of this one?
Yeah, this was great. And very heart-wrenching, I must say, because of the first time I read it, because of a certain character that goes away at the end. And of course, later on you would see differently. But I remember reading it the first time and I was just heartbroken because I love this character so much. But in the beginning, it's kind of interesting because it's like they storm this place and then they try to escape from Zizor's palace, and they kind of have him trapped. And they actually have a thermal detonator, and instead of throwing it to them, to Zizor, and he's kind of like, "Yeah, what are you gonna do? That's not gonna do anything." And then Lando's like, how about down the chute?" And he's like, "Anything but that." But it's too late by then, and it just drops and it destroys the whole base in the process. So that was just beautiful.
Yeah. Fun fact, those are also the same thermal detonators we see in Return of the Jedi. Yep, the same one that Leia was using in her Bush bounty hunter. Yep, came from here as well. So there's that too.
She even makes a remark that says she might need it later.
Well, there's that. So, yeah. Also, can we mention Luke Skywalker fighting Gory in a one-on-one duel?
Yep.
Yeah. Fucking love that. And we also get character development from her in that scene, interestingly enough. She loses, and because she lost, she tells Luke to just, kill her. But Luke being, Luke, he doesn't. And that gets further developed in the sequel story, Evolution. So I'd highly recommend reading that comic after reading this novel.
And, with the space battle, too, that occurred overhead, they actually introduced these new ships for Black Sun that I thought were pretty cool. I forget the name for them. But they were just such a unique and cool design that I really wish they were used in like games or something like that in the down the road. But I really like that design of those ships. CJ can show a picture or something. But yeah, I love that design. Those were pretty cool ships. I'm trying to think.
Apparently, the ships are some sort of a Star Viper class attack platform. That's what they're called. They're heavy starfighters based on Prince Shisor's Virago. So that's what they are.
I want to add too that with Vader coming in, he's pretty much pissed off at Zizor because he doesn't want Luke to be killed in the process. He's trying to capture him because he's a good dad. And he cares about Luke and he wants him on his side in the end. You saw that towards the end of Empire Strikes Back. He doesn't want to just kill him outright. He wants to use him because that's his son and he cares about him in a way. And he actually wants to use him for his own ends as well. But like Zizor knew that that Luke was related to Vader, so he wanted to go out of his way to kill him. And because Zizor has passed with Vader, which we won't spoil, we kind of see that why he has that hatred towards Vader.
Yep, indeed. Speaking of Vader, regarding him for his own needs, that we forgot to mention that there is this specific few moments in the Shadows of the Empire novel that Vader actually tries to use the dark side to force heal his body from his wounds that he suffered in Episode 3. Don't know if you noticed those.
Yeah, and that's certainly one of the interesting... that's something I really like in this. Now, at this point, I'm fairly certain it was already established that those were burn marks, at least in regards to the Episode 6 novelization. But either way, it's more established here that these are wounds and not just a result of using the dark side. But it's a great way of showing that the light side is stronger, because with the dark side, you can't heal yourself. not really. It just a I don't really know how to word this, but it's just a great way to show the major difference in that the light side gives you the chance to heal, and while the dark side is just this perpetual state of keeping yourself in the lowest point of your life. In this regard, that's both physical and mental.
It's kind of like with Darth Sion, where he's constantly in pain and he's almost indestructible in a way, and he doesn't know how to, heal himself at any point. But he still goes on by just using the dark side, and that's it. That's just life for him.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly. So yeah, definitely. That was an interesting tidbit regarding Vader and his character. So definitely awesome. So, and what other things you guys want to mention for this last part of the story?
Just a
Nothing
great
else.
setup for Return of the Jedi.
Nice. Well, that was the end of the main synopsis of the book itself. Now, the comic, okay, now we're getting into the parts of the comic, the ones that are exclusive to the comic itself. Because the comic is at least half or 2/3 the same story as the book, just abridged, we're not going to get into that because it'd be repeating ourselves. So we're going to be just going to the specific synopsis parts of the comic. I'm going to mention them somewhat of a quick rapid fire, and then we're going to say our thoughts on all of them. So, basically, the specific parts of the comic. So, beginning with the short battle of the Rebel fleet against an Imperial cruiser. This basically is right after Empire Strikes Back ended. Like, in the rendezvous point, they apparently were found by an Imperial cruiser, so they engaged it quickly before they escaped. So, that is in the comic. Then, of course, the Slave One arriving on Tatooine, only to get ambushed by IG-88's ship, forcing both craft to leave Tatooine to repair the ships after the dogfight ended. Then Vader testing his injured shoulder against an ASP droid while briefing a character called Jixton on his objective to infiltrate Java's sub gang to ensure Luke's capture and survival. Then, of course, Fett meets Bosk and Zuckuss in a cantina, refuses to share his bounty reward to the other bounty hunters, shoots a sniper, and escapes the cantina. Then, Fett arrives at Slave One to find 4 Lum with other 4 bounty hunters attempting to steal Solo's slab and shoots them down before seeing the Falcon approaching and takes off. This basically happened during the Gal spaceport battle. Then Jixton arrives in Mos Eisley, manages to challenge and impress Big Giz and his gang by stealing spikers, Supike, and thus getting a job for Java. Then, of course, Fett is hiding in an asteroid field when 4-LOM decides to resume operation because he had a blaster fight with Fett. Fett did completely destroy him. So before Fett disables him once more, Bosk's ship picks up the signal, attacks the stranded Slave One, then Zuckuss and his team board the ship and apprehend Fett, but Fett manages to defeat them and escape. Then Fett fixes the Slave One's lasers and tells Zuckuss his plans on delivering Solo to Java. Then in Java's palace, we see Jixton gets past security and makes contact with Vader and the Executor in order to inform him of the swoop bike incident with Luke. Vader learns that Java too had a bounty for Luke dead, put by someone who used Vader's name. And finally, on Tatooine, Fett manages to fool the stalking bounty hunters with disguised Zuckuss and a covered-up 4-LOM that will seem to be himself and a carbonite block speeding away from the Slave One. The real Fett gives the actual carbonite block offhand to Java, and he receives his payment. So, those are the specific parts of the comic. And what do you guys think of those?
It's cool to see the other bounty hunters in action.
Mm-hmm.
And I think overall I really like, seeing Boba Fett do everything in his power to get Solo to Jabba and hitting roadblocks along the way as he should, given, the cargo he's carrying. I just wish more of the comic was like that. Like, you have a big difference between the novel and video game. But the comic is in this weird position of being a adaptation of the novel while also trying to give you a reason to pick up the comic. I think if the comic went more so with what the game did of being its own story set in this multimedia project, I would have enjoyed it more.
Mm-hmm.
There's that.
Yep. The Django?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was all right. It was mostly the same except for the parts you just mentioned with the bounty hunters. And it was kind of like really corny to see Boba Fett just kind of argue with a Han Solo carbonite. Like, just really, is that really necessary? I thought that was kind of stupid in a way. I don't even know why they added that, but I do want to mention that it was written by John Wagner, and he's been involved with like a lot of the main Star Wars projects, and he's done a lot of Boba Fett stories. So it's kind of surprising to see how he makes Boba Fett appear in this. But I mean, this is kind of like one of his first stories with Boba Fett because he would do later Boba Fett stories. So it is interesting. Well, they're trying to do with Boba Fett. I don't think that's kind of like how he wanted to show Boba Fett. It was probably someone else who kind of like directed it in a way. So because it's kind of like a new story of sorts. So, and I thought the artwork was fine. It was not the greatest, of course, but it was a decent comic book story, I will say. I mean, it's not even close to the quality there is in the novel.
Indeed. So my thoughts on the comic, yeah, most half of it I do enjoy. The other half, I just think it's fine. I guess I'm pretty sure you guys can guess which part is which. So there's that. So yeah, comic version, not much, especially if you already read the book. It's great for those who don't want to read the book, but then again, the book is so much better with the main story, so just go with the book. So, but the comic, it has some stuff to make it kind of worth it. But honestly, unless you can read it for free somewhere online, unless you can do that, it's not really worth getting physically unless you're a diehard completionist of the expanded universe. So yeah, that's the only reason I would recommend the comic if you're a diehard completionist. So there's that. So any final things to mention on the comic, guys?
No.
Okay, well, now we get to the expanded universe connections / references in Shadows of the Empire, and boy, so okay. If you guys have seen our previous CU podcast, you know that not only do I have a specific image showing at least a good amount of the connections we mentioned, like a rough image, but also we mentioned several. Shadows of the Empire, boy, this is one of those in the Hispanic universe that has a lot, and I mean a lot of connections with the rest of the Hispanic universe, from elements that Shadows itself references from previous EU material to, well, a shit ton of Hispanic universe sources and material, like ranging from the Old Republic era all the way to the Legacy era, not chronologically, but even in real life terms, like lots of it, like so many. Like Black Sun alone has like fucking 50 of them, 50 appearances, as well as the many amounts of several essential guides, like lots of them. So boy, plenty of them. So before I mention like the ones I found, so Henson, the Django, you guys got some?
I can go first. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, go.
So there's two side characters I kind of want to mention. So we first have Gizman, also known as Big Giz. He's the leader of the Swoop Gang. I remember just like reading his name, and I thought it was Big Jizz for the longest.
It's a butcher, yeah.
But he's actually featured in a bunch of other stories. I remember seeing him before, seeing the comic and seeing him for the first time. I was like, oh wait, I've seen him before. And it was actually in Star Wars Tales number 4, Sandblasted, where he fights a Dark Trooper. So that was interesting. And we also have Jabba Tape, the Mandalorian armor story, and a bunch of the Clone Wars comic series, which is like the newer Clone Wars series.
CW.
Yeah. So he's featured in that, and then we also have Star Wars Missions, which is kind of like a short, like a children's novel series. But yeah, he's in quite a few that I didn't expect. I thought it was just one story, but there's quite a few stories he's in. We also have Jix, also known as Renga Jixton, who works directly for Darth Vader. While he's not featured in the Shadows of the Empire novel, he is featured in the comic series and shown for the first time. He actually is mentioned he first appeared in Return of the Jedi, though I don't remember which moment it was. I'm guessing in Jabba's palace, but it's hard to say. Like he's supposed to be like a background character.
He's supposed to be a background character somewhere in Java's palace.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think like where exactly that moment is, but yeah, apparently he's a background character. So, but he's also featured in another story called Shadow Stalker. I barely remember the story, but it was kind of forgettable. But I mean, he is in one story, and I think he's in the trading card game, and I mentioned in a few other stories, but that's really it.
Yep, indeed. So those are the two main ones from the Shells the Empire comic. Now, when we go to both the comic and the book, so there's plenty. I already mentioned Black Sun has a shit ton of them, from the Old Republic MMORPG to Darth Plagueis, Darth Maul comics, Star Wars Jango Fett, so on and so forth in the Course and Knights trilogy, Shadow games, of course. So there's that. Speaking of Shadow games, so Dash Rendar himself. So he was first mentioned in Star Wars Galaxy Magazine 6, which was a sneak peek to Shadows of the Empire Multimedia Project before it came out, and of course, full first appearance was Shadows of the Empire. So Dash Rendar himself, he's appeared on several sources, of course, Shadow Games, which is a book about him. He also appeared in Rebel Dawn, the AC Crispin Han Solo book trilogy. Star Wars X-Wing Alliance, of course, Shadows of the Empire Evolution 5, which means he... well, I won't get into that specific one, but yeah, he pretty much... he has definitely been pretty much featured in several other sources. But the character that has had quite a few more appearances than either of those three characters we mentioned is none other than the big green baddie himself, Prince Shizor. He is... while not all over the place as Black Sun, he's close. So not only is he mentioned in Darth Plagueis, yep, that book, but also appears or even mentioned in the Course of Knights trilogy, and even the fourth book of that, The Last Jedi. Not the movie, The Last Jedi, the 2013 book, if I'm not mistaken. He also shows up in the in Rebel Dawn, mentioned in the Hot Gambit, aka Secret Spin's Han Solo trilogy. Empire War Force of Corruption hologram, of course, Shadows of the Empire entire multimedia. Then he also appears in flashbacks in the entire Bounty Hunter Wars trilogy, Mandalorian Armor, Slave Ship Hard Merchandise. Mara Jade by the Emperor's Hand appears in hologram, and there's a statue in Emperor's Hand 6. Then Shadows of the Empire Evolution, flashbacks. He's also mentioned in several post-Return of the Jedi sources besides just Shadows of the Empire Evolution. Like he's mentioned in an issue of X-Wing Rogue Squadron, which is 25, Making of Baron Fail. He also shows up in 3 books of X-Wing, which is Gamble, Kratos Trap, and the Back to War. He actually, you're not gonna believe this, guys. Shizor was actually first mentioned in Dark Saber somehow. Like, wait, what? Maybe he was mentioned as a first, I guess this Dark Prince is controlling, control Black Sun, because I don't think it was last with full name and everything. That pretty much must have been that obviously Shadows of the Empire. So it must have been.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a reference to some head of a criminal organization, and then it was retconned into being Prince Shizor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So there's that. Vision of the Future also mentions Prince Shizor, which is definitely something. So there's that. Of course, whenever Shizor is mentioned, Black Sun is mentioned. So all of those sources are mentioned. They also apply to Black Sun. So there's that too. He also is mentioned in Vision of the Future, also in the Young Jedi Knights, 2 of them. Return to Ord Mantell, Trouble in Cloud City. Star Wars Insider 75 as well. Even Fate of the Jedi Backlash mentions Shizor. And that's like, what, 45 ABY? Like, holy shit. I guess people didn't forget about Shizor in a long while. So, there's that. So,
yeah, not bad for a guy who was, killed off in his first appearance.
Yep, indeed. So, there's that too. The Fallen, the entire species, Prince Shizor, because he was basically the first ever Fallen to be featured in Star Wars. He pretty much was a canvas for the entire Fallen species system, kind of like Asajj Ventress with the Rad Takai, kind of like that. or Darth Maul with the Sabrax. So yeah, so the Fallen, they're almost everywhere. Knights of the Old Republic comics, Old Republic Annihilation, Knight Errant, Darth Plague is mentioned. Like,
And there's like one Empire story that's very specific where they ambush Vader and they are speaking out because of the event that happened, which Vader is related to with the Fallen. So there is directly a point from Shadows of the Empire for this.
yep, definitely. It's Empire 19, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, that's the one. So yeah, definitely amazing. And of course, if all they even show up all the way to the Jedi Order, Darkness trilogy, Legacy of the Force, Fate of the Jedi. Like, definitely, Shadows of the Empire definitely made an impact with that. So yeah, but that's not the end, guys. No, there's a few other things that Shadows of the Empire introduced, or at least fleshed out. Rhodia, yes, the planet Rhodia, the planet of the Rhodians, also was first mentioned, first appeared in Shadows of the Empire. Yep. This is actually the first appearance of Rhodia, not TCW, as a few will probably believe. No, Shadows of the Empire. And ever since then, Rhodia has been at least mentioned, even shown up in several other sources. Old Republic, of course. The MMORPG, I mean. Even one of the Boba Fett books, Boba Fett Pursuit, Labyrinth Evil mentions it. Shadow Games, it actually makes an appearance. And also Ninja Order shows up, and Darkness. So, yep. So an extra point for Rodian there. The planet Bothui, which, while it was first mentioned in Dark Force Rising, his first actual appearance was Shadows of the Empire. And since then, well, of course, he's been using that appearance across the entire expanded universe. Multiple sources, even Empire at War, Star Wars Rebellion. So, and also, of course, Spectre of the Past, Vision of the Future, and several others. Like, there's plenty. And here's an interesting one. The Imperial Freighter Suprosa, the one that had the supercomputer, that actually first appeared in Shadows of the Empire, but it was also mentioned in Star Wars X-Wing Alliance. It was even featured in it. And it was also mentioned in The Rise and Fall of Darth Vader. So that's an interesting one. So one of the elements of Shadows of the Empire from all the sources appears in one of the late 90s Star Wars video games. That's not Shadows of the Empire, which that's pretty interesting. Not gonna lie.
And also the later games with like Rogue Squadron 2, you see appearance of, I think, the schematics of the Death Star. And then you also see Bounty Hunter as well.
Yeah. So the Star Viper class attack platforms, basically the ships that are modeled after Prince Shisor's Burago, those they actually show up Star Wars Empire at War, as well as flashbacks in the Mandalorian armor, slave ship, card merchandise, even Legacy of the Force Sacrifice mentions it. So there's that too, and there's also another one. This is a small one, but it's interesting. So Giju's stool, which was a specific plate that Lando served to Luke, Chewie, and I think that, well, maybe not Dash, but definitely. So they served the Giju stew in the Abortable Millennium Falcon. Lando overcooks it, so that blows. But that specific plate, it actually has two other appearances. This is not the only appearance in the novel. No, it actually shows up in New Jedi Order, mentioned in one book, Edge of Victory 2, and shown up in Destiny's Way. So there's that, and the complete Star Wars Encyclopedia as well. So yeah, that's a very interesting one. So there's that, and there's several other things when it comes to references. Black Sun, we can make an entire fucking list of it. Well, there already is. And so yeah, that's a rough summary of the amount of EU connections / references that Shadows of the Empire has. Many of them. It's a lot. So, any other ones that we're missing, guys?
Did you mention that Zizor makes a cameo appearance in the pod race?
That's,
in episode 1?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so regarding that, so apparently he makes cameo appearances in the Phantom Menace as a Micro Machine toy figure, to supplement for the... Though right now it's not known if that's canon. It could have been just to fill in the spots. We don't know yet if that's canon or not, because according to the appearances in Wikipedia, it doesn't really mention Phantom Menace. So it is yet to be established if he was actually there. So
They actually used the Micro Machine, like just the toys, just to portray him. Like I see an image of that. I could send that to you.
yeah, I actually I have the image here. It actually looks
Okay.
pretty interesting. Even looks like Chewbacca's behind him. So indeed. So yeah, there's that. Any other references, guys?
Oh, and the special edition of A New Hope, they actually included the Outrider and the Sentinel class landing craft, which makes a first appearance in Shadows of the Empire.
Oh, don't forget also the swoop bikes and swoop gang from
Oh yeah,
they also show up here as well.
ASP labor droids. Yep.
Yep. Also, yeah, those droids also appear here in the episode 4 special edition. The special edition of episode 4 was actually actually the 3 special editions, but more episode 4. They were actually supposed to tie into Shadows of the Empire, so it makes perfect sense that you have all those references. Like, yes, you could say it was made for marketing, but it also was made to flesh out more the Star Wars continuity. So there's that too. I also have to mention human replica droids. So, of course, Guri, she's an HRD, human replica droid. However, they actually were first mentioned or even first identified in Queen of the Empire, which is actually the 5th book in the Jedi Prince book series. Yeah, so so the type of droid that Guri is actually not the first time that showed up in the expanded universe. So there's that, and the human replica droids, they show up in several other sources. So there's that. Though actually the first appearance was in I think it was a comic strip written by Archie Goodwin regarding Ice World. So which is actually from the old Marvel days. So there's that too. So yeah, plenty of sources, plenty of references. Plenty of them. Of course, Star Wars Shadows of the Empire, The Evolution, the sequel in the comic form, that also plays a part. So, yeah, there's plenty of sources. Are there any noteworthy ones we're missing, guys? I got one. Okay, obviously, the Essential Guides cover Shadows of the Empire. Yes, even the Essential Reader's Companion, the one that hates talking about the Boba Fett comics for some godforsaken reason. Yes, even that one has to reference Shadows of the Empire. There's no way around it. All the guides, since they showed up in the late 90s, all of them have been referencing Shadows of the Empire from the New Essential Chronology, the New Essential Guide to Characters. Of course, the Essential Atlas, because the planets that were introduced. Also, the Essential Guide to Warfare. Several others. And I think even the Complete Star Wars Encyclopedia, though I don't think so with that one. But I definitely... Well, actually, yes, the Complete Star Wars Encyclopedia does actually mention it. The one that I actually meant that didn't mention it, I actually meant the Star Wars The Complete Visual Dictionary. That's the one. I don't know if it references anything from Shadows of the Empire. But the Complete Star Wars Encyclopedia, definitely. So there's that, and the Essential Reader's Companion. So yeah, Shadows of the Empire, it's definitely fully C canon in the expanded universe. There's no way around it. Those that for some reason hate Shadows of the Empire and don't want to see it canon in the EU for some reason, sorry, but it's fully canon in the EU. There's no way around that. So, so yeah, there's that about Shadows of the Empire in terms of its canonicity in the expanded universe. So yep. Anything else to mention, guys?
Quick note, the sequel story, Evolution, is also written by Steve Perry, who wrote the novel, so just another reason to read it after you finish the novel.
Mm-hmm. Yep, indeed. So yeah, Django, any final things to say?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Evolution, if you were kind of disheartened for the ending for Shadows of the Empire, don't worry. Wait till the end of Evolution, and then it'll be all the more satisfying.
Mm-hmm. Yep, indeed. So yeah, so with that said, now we get into the conclusion for this podcast. This definitely was a very interesting one. So I'll let you guys go first. So who goes first with their final thoughts on Shadows of the Empire, book and comic?
I'll go. So, in conclusion, if someone were to ask me what the perfect introduction to the EU or what a good first EU story would be, I would choose this one. It's standalone. It's a major story set between two films. Good way to ease yourself into this very large continuity. And the story itself is really good. Like I said, I think it's better than Heir to the Empire in terms of just being a far more interesting story, in my opinion. And I mean, hey, as a multimedia project, or as a part of the multimedia project, it serves its purpose really well.
Yep. So, any final things to mention, Henson, or that's it?
No, that's it on my end.
Okay, Django, go ahead.
All right, so this is easily one of like just a legendary Star Wars story that you have to read. You're doing yourself a huge disservice. A great branching point for those who want to get into the expanded universe. This is the perfect book to get into, and it's just one small little novel, and you're gonna have a great time reading it. That's a guarantee. I know they probably say that a million times in these commercials or whatever. That's a guarantee. No, this is a real guarantee. Okay. So yeah, this is just a very influential title, as we mentioned, with all the EU references, and it still lives on as like just a fantastic story. More so the novel. The comic is kind of forgettable for me, but the novel is where it's at, and it's something you have to experience for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Indeed. So now, as for me, well, Shadows of the Empire, book and comic. Comic, decent. Book, amazing. It still is my favorite Expanded Universe book, mostly because it was the first one I ever read and my introduction to Expanded Universe. So I still love it to this day, and I still strongly appreciate what it did for Expanded Universe, and also what it did for me when it came to my Expanded Universe journey and my love for Star Wars, more so than the certain movie that pretty much drove me into reading it. But I guess
Cough.
though I guess I have that movie to thank for finally giving the push to reach out the Empire. So yeah, but Shadows of the Empire, great story, great book and everything. I was already a fan of the video game, but the book, it's definitely where it's at in terms of the actual full entire story of Shadows of the Empire. Game it diverges a little bit, but that's for another podcast. So when? No idea. So we mostly had our thoughts on doing the book and the comic. Those are the major ones to talk about from a continuity standpoint. But the game definitely can still deserve its own podcast. But with that said, yeah, Shadow of the Empire, amazing, excellent, and so I cannot recommend it enough for every single, even those that have only watched the movies, even if it's just episodes 4, 5, and 6, read Shadows of the Empire. That book. Read it. Hell, even the audiobook. I don't know, whichever one. Just read it. It's great. And if you already played the video game, cool. Read the book. Even more incentive to read the book. Seriously, read this book. It's the perfect introduction for Expanded Universe newcomers. It's the perfect one. And people will tell you the Tron trilogy is the perfect introduction. Kind of, but given that it's a trilogy, it will seem daunting to newcomers. Shadows of the Empire, just one book, perfect introduction. And if you like that book, then that's where you can go to the Tron trilogy, pretty much, because now you know how the Expanded Universe pretty much works. So, yeah, Shadows of the Empire, go with it. There's no way you can go wrong with this one. It's excellent, and if you're already an original trilogy fan, there's no way to go but up. Or positive, however you want to say that. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Shadows of the Empire, and this was definitely a great podcast. So we'll see you guys on the next State of Star Wars. What will it be? We'll see. So yeah, that's all for now, guys, and we'll see you guys on the next video. Bye bye.
See you guys.
Bye.